evening, friends. Good evening, Brendan. Welcome to Sunday Night Live. How are you tonight?
I'm good, Father. How are you?
It's good. It's good to be back with you at the end. Well, the beginning of another week. Another week in
Mm.
lockdown. Here we are. Uh, Locked down. No,
We are. Look, there hasn't been any liftings, but
I'd
I'm
like to
still,
have
I'm
been up to
still.
start tonight on a positive note, but
Hey, still positive. 25 Ks. What a wonderful radius to have. I'm
d-
enjoying that.
where
But
does
but
that
hold on.
where does that get someone who lives in Werribee?
In where Caroline Springs, Altona Beach.
Oh, there you go.
Um, wow. Yeah, just everywhere you need to be, really. Look,
Well,
getting to the beach is now. No, I haven't actually gone yet, but it's a possibility.
it's a
It's all about
Well, it's
possibilities.
all about living in hope, really. One day you could take the cello to the beach because that's another possibility for you.
Actually, yeah, that is a possibility. What's another possibility is that someone buys it off the Facebook Marketplace. I haven't put it up yet, but I'm still kind of. There's part of me that's like, oh, I could still learn. Maybe there were some people in the comments that were really keen for me to actually give it another try, and some of my friends were like, no, keep the cello. We'll see. But hold on, I got something else during the week which I'm really excited about. It's this right here. I don't know if you can see, and for the listeners, it's a miraculous medal, right?
Yeah,
Right, I don't know. But it's got a lovely blue enamel in it, and
right.
it's beautiful. I got it from, do you know Gabby After Hours on YouTube?
No.
He's done some beautiful, like, what do you call them? Not quite documentary, but he does like kind of a style of video that's really, it's very nice to watch.
And
And
he's been
he's
watching
done
our
it.
podcast and he reached out and said, I love what you
Wow, how
do
did you
here.
do it so well? Yeah, that's no. But anyway, he's done some videos on like the rosary, and he did one on dancing, on the morality of dancing, which he probably would. It was really funny. I thought he was joking, and then I'm like, oh, interesting points. Anyway, he's done like a bunch of different videos. So I'm a Patreon of his now, and he sent me this all the way from New Jersey or somewhere in America.
There you
But
go.
that's been one little
Little
spark of hope
more of a glimmer in your
and
week
joy
this
in
week.
my week. What's been a spark of joy in your week?
Spark of joy in my week is that my internet seems to be working really well at the moment, even though yours is playing up. And I know that you normally have a go at my internet, but it seems to be your internet that's sort of struggling a little bit this evening.
I think that look, there's some Werribee is a wonderful place, but that you got to take there's some setbacks that have to be taken when one does live in Werribee, and that means that the cable of connection is a little bit further away from Melbourne than maybe from someone in Mount Waverley. However, is this a good segue? I don't know. There's been some big news during the week, Father.
We'll come back to the big news, but a
We'll
welcome to
come
those of
back
you who
to it.
are listening live this evening. Make sure you add some comments into the com box. We've already seen a few comments already who agree with Brendan that the 25Ks just adds a big difference. I actually drove my car more than 25Ks during the week, and it was sort of a bit of an experience. I realised that this is a really strange realisation, but I put petrol in my car this week for the second time since January.
Wait,
That
what?
I went to a petrol station and put petrol in my car for only the second time since January.
What car do you? That's a massive tank, or you really just have not
What?
been
Where have I
driving.
gone? Well, you remember that I was away for the first 3 months of the year. I got back in March, and then since then we've been on lockdown. That's how long it's been. So
Bunnings,
second time, not great for my engine,
the
says
hospital.
my channel. Thanks very much. Probably actually does need a service as well, so we'll be doing that. But yeah, so I almost sort of forgot where the little lever was to get the thing open. Will who's listening tonight? There hasn't been a change for churches yet here in Victoria, apart from in regional Victoria. For those of you who live outside the Ring of Steel, there is some good news there that the Premier has allowed for 20 people inside churches as of this Wednesday. So I suppose there is a reason for hope there that hopefully that when within the Ring of Steel things do open up, that we might skip that sort of outdoor marquee, windswept sort of mass experience for 20, and we might go, as we've been asking for quite reasonably, into a internal celebration of the Mass. So a bit of good news for us all. Brendan, let's jump straight into it this week. Your top 5. What is it? And Brendan seems to have frozen right there. You there, Brendan?
I hope I am.
There you are.
That's all right. I'm here. Hello. No, that's good. I agree. Ring of Steel's still there, but it's good to hear. At least there's some progress in terms of churches being opened up. So it's 20 allowed in service. Is that right?
Out in regional Victoria as of Wednesday,
Victoria.
Indoors, which is a wonderful thing. So big shout out to all of those of you who signed the petition at Equality for Faith, which is still going. So if you haven't had a chance to, you can jump on equality.forfaith.com.au and pop your name down there. Amazing freeze frame, says Clara, because Brendan's internet is so bad. We might get some really interesting sort of looks this evening. Brendan, your top 5 this week. Let's jump straight in.
Top 5, and under the circumstances, I wish I kind of switched it up. I'll tell you in a second. But anyway, my top 5 is top 5 saints to call on in times of need.
Top 5 saints to call on in times of need. What a
And
great
I realize
topic.
now I should have put Saint Irenaeus on there because he's the patron saint of the internet. I think.
Right.
Apparently. Saint Irenaeus. Or Irenaeus. I can't say it properly.
I think it's Irenaeus.
I think so too. Anyhow, apologies, Saint Irenaeus, for not putting you on there, but please do come to my aid right now and all the internet in Werribee. But yeah, this is the top 5.
Here we go, number 5.
Number 5 is Saint Christopher.
Saint Christopher.
Which probably we wouldn't have, I mean, at the moment we're probably not turning him to too much, but he's the patron saint of, I always say patron wrong. I say patron, and I think I get that from Matt Frad. I don't know if anyone else says patron. Anyway, he's the patron saint of travel. And
Here
of
we go.
course,
Do you know
when
why?
you get in the car, I know the story. It's a good story.
Tell the story, Brendan. Tell the story.
Of him traveling. Oh, look, I'll tell the story in as quick as I can. Basically, Saint Christopher, he wanted to serve the greatest king he could, and he went all around, and he's trying to find. So he found this kind of like the local lord, like the local, I don't know, manor king, whatever dude. And he started serving him, and then he realized that this king was really scared of this other guy who was like an outlaw, whose name was the devil. Anyhow, so he goes and finds that outlaw dude and starts serving him. But then he found out that the devil, so he starts serving this guy. But he found out the devil was scared of someone called Jesus. So, and this is like Jesus that like died on the cross, Jesus. Anyway, so he goes to find out how to serve Jesus because he wants to serve the greatest king. And he comes to this hermit who's like really holy and prays a lot, this monk, and asked, how can I serve the greatest king? And this hermit says, fast. And Saint Christopher says, but I like food because I'm a big man. And so he says, okay, go to this river and help people cross it because there was no bridge. So Saint Christopher's like, cool, I'll do that if I can keep on eating food. So he goes to the river and he helps people across all the time. And then one time there was a little kid who wanted to go across the river. He picks up this kid, puts it on his shoulders. As he's going across the river, he's like, this kid is really heavy. And he keeps on going, gets halfway, and he's like, this kid is like the heaviest person I've ever carried. And then almost by the end, he like almost can't bear the weight of this child anymore. And then he finally just gets to the edge, puts the kid down, and he's like, why are you so heavy? And the kid said, because you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And because that kid was Jesus.
Brendan, that was such an amazing story that you even got your own spotlight, whole screen sort of, which is only really reserved for guests who have something sort of really worthwhile to say. So you've never had that before, but there you go.
There we go. Well, there you go.
And that's only for number 5. Imagine the whole show's going to be filled up with the next 4. If
think about it, I actually don't know if I know the stories of the other guys that well. Anyway, he's the patron saint of travel. So
okay, St. Christopher. We've had a few others in the comments as well. St. Gemma Gagliani, St. Jose Maria. Jerry points out that Blessed Carlo Acutis might be taking St. Irenaeus.
Good.
Joe and I on a Thursday night have had good luck with him and our internet. So, Saint Christopher, we get here. Blessed Bartolo Longo. There you go. Someone new there. I'm not quite sure who that is. I have to look that up. Okay, number 4, Brendan.
Number 4 is Saint Francis.
Yep.
Because if you're ever in danger of animals and animals biting you or scaring you or wrapping around your leg.
Happen a lot as you walk in the streets of Werribee, or what?
When you're in Werribee, I mean, let's be real. We live in Australia. Like, everything can kill you here. Apparently, that's what they say. I don't live in that constant fear, but there's a lot of snakes, spiders. I stomped on a spider today. I prayed to Saint Francis. I made an argument a little last year at the end of TAP, if anyone was there, at Theology at the pub, and I made the argument that cats go to heaven.
Oh, come on now. This was the most rigged, ridiculous debate I've ever been a part of, and
it was quite the event. If anyone missed it, you missed out. There was a vote
it recorded
as to who. I don't think anyone did, unfortunately. That would
probably good, considering I brought a pizza out as a prop at the end. So
you did very well, Father. So Father and I were debating on separate teams. He was debating that cats don't go to heaven because Father Nick isn't always the nicest person around. But anyway, I don't know if I've admitted this to you, Father, but I don't actually believe that cats go to heaven. I was just, for the sake of debate, for the lively debate. Doesn't matter, though, because we won. It was done by vote, and we won. I think it was like 96 votes to 95.
How many Facebook profiles did you vote under that night, Brendan?
4.
And how many points did your team win by that night, Brendan?
1.
Carry on. Number 3.
St. Thomas Aquinas.
St. Thomas Aquinas. For students?
And I say that for the sake of all of the students and the uni student, so all of the uni students and the students going through their exams right now. Right
now. Shout out to John Florio, who was one of our guests earlier in the week, who has his last exam tomorrow, and then he's going to be unleashed on the big bad world. So if you're listening tonight, John, you shouldn't be. You should be studying. But anyway.
Studying, and we're praying for you. St. Thomas.
St. Christopher, St. Francis, Thomas Aquinas. Number 2.
Okay, number 2, which comes very closely after St. Thomas, I reckon, is St. Cajutan.
Right.
Do you know who he is?
No, I've heard of him, but
Yeah, he's a counter-reformationist. Anyway, he was in the Counter-Reformation. He was around that time, and he was epic. His nickname was the Huntsman for Souls, because that's how passionate he was about keeping people in the Catholic faith.
Oh, huntsman as in like a hunter, not like as in a spider.
Not like the spider, no, a huntsman, like hunting. Yeah. Anyway, that's what they nicknamed him. And he was super cool, but he was also very generous and looked after the poor, but also helped people get employed. If anyone was unemployed, he'd help them get employed. And he's the patron. He's the patron, not the patron. He's the patron saint of the unemployed. So if you ever are looking for work, want to find a new job, whatever it is, pray to Saint Cajutan, because he will intercede for you. I say that from personal experience and from all of my other friends as well. He does the trick. That's
okay. And lucky last, number 1
is. I think it has to be number 1 in times of need. I feel like this is the saint that I should also say, Our Lady is the best saint to go to for
Please tell me this is not... Wow.
Sorry, but it's actually not Our Lady. Like, I didn't put Our Lady on this list, but I understand that she is... I feel like she goes without saying, because she's the greatest saint. We all know...
Carry on. Number 1. Who tops Our Lady as intercessors for you, Brendan?
This is not good. I know, and I was just talking about the Miraculous Medal around my...
This podcaster somewhere in America right now is going, I spent $20 to post it to you, and anyway...
Sorry to disappoint. But it's Saint Anthony.
Okay.
Classic. Come on, patron saint of lost things. I don't actually know the story. I don't know why he's the patron saint of lost things. But if you ever lose anything, like anything, pray to Saint Anthony. I actually don't think I can recall a time where I've prayed to Saint Anthony and I still haven't found what I was looking for.
Yeah,
I got a
so
story.
I have an even better Saint Anthony than Saint Anthony.
Who?
So
Don't-
we've got your top five. So it's Christopher, Francis, Thomas, Cajutan, and Anthony. Anthony was my number three,
All
and
right.
because I only do three, so Anthony was there. But I don't actually pray to Saint Anthony. I ask a good friend of mine whose name is Anthony to pray to Saint Anthony for me, and without fail, it works every time.
Really?
Yeah, and it's
is that the
because
truth, is it?
Saint Anthony's got a bit fed up with me because I scoffed at him for a little bit too long. Especially when this good mate of mine, Anthony, you'd say, I'll pray to Saint Anthony for you, and it always worked. I scoffed. But now, if I lose anything, I will call, and it's something I really need to find. I lost my wallet a few months back, and I called my mate Anthony, bang, and found it. So Saint Anthony listens to Anthony's. Or maybe at least this one Anthony.
There we go. Well, I haven't had to go through another mediator of another Anthony to get there, but but that being said, I've never scoffed at the idea of Saint Anthony. So, 100%, pray to Saint Anthony. One of my friends once lost their phone on a beach at night. A beach, am I right? And we found it.
Saint Anthony, thank you.
Saint Anthony, and I'm not scoffing at that. I'm not laughing at that. That's a miracle.
I've stopped scoffing at Saint Anthony.
That's my top five. Okay, so he's your number three. Who was your number three? I hope it wasn't Anthony.
Yeah, Saint Anthony.
Oh, Saint Anthony. Cool. It
Via
wasn't Anthony.
Anthony.
Okay, cool. Who's number two?
We go to number one.
Yep.
The Blessed Virgin Mary. I'm sorry, I can't believe that you left her off. But I think, and we've been doing this here at Holy Family. We've been doing this Edward III study program on the Blessed Virgin Mary in Scripture. But also in the program that we've been doing on a Tuesday night, we looked at Mary last week, and the link between Solomon's mother, not Solomon's mother, David's mother,
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba, yeah, in
Solomon's
the Old Testament,
mother.
the Queen Mother,
Queen
then that she was the intercessor before the king, and that this is where we find our real understanding of Mary's role as both Queen of Heaven, but also as the first intercessor with her son. So Mary would be number one, and number two would it be Saint Michael. So I can't believe that you left Saint Michael the Archangel off your.
I'm just a bad guy. Oh dear. Oh man.
So it would have to be
that makes total sense.
Sort of a bit of a toss up between my own guardian angel, and I was actually born on the feast of the guardian angels. So I think I have quite a few guardian angels looking after me, but my own guardian angel and Saint Michael in particular. And I've it's quite I suppose providential. I've grown, especially this year, in a particular devotion to Saint Michael because. Really felt, I suppose, with the virus and the closing of churches, a real sense of a supernatural sort of battle going on. That with so many faithful people being away from the sacraments and away from sort of God's grace in such a tangible way, a real reliance on Saint Michael, which of course is really sort of it was providential in the last week because. I suppose completely out of the blue, but I've just been asked to take up a new parish appointment, and it's at the parish of St. Michael's. And I'm like, wait a minute, I really ratcheted up my prayer to St. Michael all year. So when I got the phone call and got asked, I'm like, which parish? And he was like, St. Michael's. And they're going, this is just a little bit too providential for even my liking. So St. Michael's pretty high there on my list.
Beautiful. That's very exciting. So wait, it's St. Michael's whereabouts?
St. Michael's in North Melbourne. So thanks, Jerry, for picking up on the great segue that I just did there. Really,
much better than mine, may I say?
Exactly. So it's a parish that's really close to Melbourne University. So the Archbishop's really encouraging us to really spend some time focusing on our university chaplaincy and also supporting some of the other universities and the chaplaincies going on at other places as well. So a really good experience. Clara said I'll be closer to the west. I did actually realise it is actually, even though it's North Melbourne, I think it is actually officially in the western region.
In the west,
of
because
Melbourne.
we all know that the west is the best, Father. Welcome.
East side to west side. All those
it.
prayers that have been asking for me to become a little bit more of a Westie. Well, there you go. So that move's going to be happening in a couple of weeks, and hopefully, Brendan, it might coincide with when we might be able to do the podcast live together again. So we might find a new studio somewhere in North Melbourne and be able to get together in a couple of weeks' time, which would be
so good.
Exciting. So, but it's a Sunday, and people have missed Mass once again. Hopefully, maybe one of the last Sundays where people are unable to get to Mass. But hopefully you had a chance to reflect on the scriptures a little bit. One of my favourite Gospels, actually, and one of the first Gospels I ever had to write a homily on was the Gospel that we had today from the Gospel of Matthew. And it's the account of the Pharisees questioning Jesus about the law, and Jesus giving them the two great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and that this is the greatest and the first commandment. And then you must love your neighbour as yourself. And soon after I was ordained, I got invited to go back to my high school and celebrate the Year 12 graduation mass. And this was the gospel that they chose. So I don't know whether they got the homily that they were necessarily expecting, but this was the gospel that I remember it quite fondly because I sort of put a fair bit of effort into it, which means I sort of give that same one homily every 3 years when it comes up on a Sunday now. But I think it's really important because often this gospel is or I suppose we sometimes present the teachings of Christ as all being about love our neighbour as ourselves and putting our neighbour before ourselves and serving our neighbour. But Jesus really clearly points out in this gospel that it's loving God first that has to be at the heart of everything that we do. And that rather than just being people who serve, and service is a really important part of our Christian faith, but that this service only comes out of a deep-seated, rooted and love for the Lord and a relationship with Him. So Jesus really sort of points that out for us in the gospel today. And he gives us this sort of threefold sort of mantra, which I think is something really good for us as Christians to follow. The first is we must love Him with our heart. And this is just that timely reminder that Jesus wasn't revealed to us as a series of laws or teachings, but He was revealed to us as a person. And He's a person that we can have a relationship with. And that at the core of our faith, we should be striving to build a deep and personal and abiding relationship with the Lord on a human level. And that this is the first, if you know what I mean. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart. Like this is the first thing before we do anything else. Before we serve the poor, before we sing in a choir, before we do anything else for the church, we're called to love the Lord our God with all our hearts. And if we don't have that as our foundational core, then everything else will start to fall apart. And if we don't have that to come back to when everything else does fall apart, and everything else will fall apart at some point or another, if we don't have that deep and abiding relationship with Him at our core, then we're going to be in trouble. But then he says, you've got to love Him with all your soul. And I remember speaking to the school students about this, but I thought about it again this morning with the grand final yesterday. And I'm a Hawks supporter, so I'm glad to see that Geelong got beaten, no matter who by, even though it was the Tigers. And but that we see in someone like Dusty, who gets the Norm Smith medal 3 times in a row, that he's a guy who plays football with his soul. Like he throws everything into the game, and this is why time and time again he wins this award, because there's something about him that's a bit more than every other player. And that's what the Lord's asking of us, like that we don't just have this deep and abiding relationship with Him in our hearts, but it's something that is then lived out in our lives, and that we courageously sort of give everything to Him, and that we live it out with passion. And then finally, we love Him with our minds, and that we do have a God that we can know. And Jerry, you're going to love this segue, because here's the great segue to our guest this evening, Silvana Scarfe, who's joining us, but I've been working with Silvana for the last couple of weeks on the Unlocking the Mysteries of the Faith series that we've been doing for university students on a Tuesday night. But it's been a great series because it's really helped people realise that we can grasp God with our minds. And we can ask questions and that there is answers. And that we should be striving to know our faith more deeply on an intellectual level. So, a great gospel for us. And I suppose if we do these three things, then it gets lived out in our daily lives. Then we can love our neighbour. And that sort of just happens as a result. If we do the first three things, the love of neighbour flows from that. And it becomes easy. And we see that in the lives of the saints. We see that in the saints, even the obscure ones that you've picked tonight, Brendan. But that they don't actually have to go out of their way to be good and to serve the poor and to love their neighbour. It actually just happens because they've got that deep relationship with the Lord and because they're willing to actually act out of that relationship with their souls to give their lives to the Lord, and that they know their faith and they know what it means to be a disciple and they're willing to share that with others as well. So it's a great gospel for each one of us. So if you didn't get a chance to get to Mass today and you haven't reflected on that scriptures, I really encourage you to maybe take it in prayer in the days ahead. But I gave her the segue already, so we're really glad that Silvana's with us this evening. So we're going to let her out of the waiting room. Good evening, Silvana.
Good evening, Father and Brendan. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on Sunday night. We've Brendan, what episode is this?
29, I reckon.
29. So
29.
You're number 29. No, 28, because I don't think we had a guest in the first week, Brendan. But we've had a
First 2 weeks. First 2 or 3 weeks we didn't. So yeah.
Okay. So you're about 25, Silvana. 25. If we were doing a top 25 list of Catholics in Australia, then you make the top 25. You are.
Thanks, guys.
You're on the list. But we've really loved having different people on each week because we had the Cardinal and we've had the Archbishop and we've had sort of famous Catholics, but we've also had lots of really just, please don't take this the wrong way, really ordinary Catholics who are doing great things with their life. And I've really enjoyed working with you over the last couple of weeks on the Unlocking the Mystery of the Faith series. What's it been like for you, sort of working with me? No, what's it been like
Wow.
for you, sort of, we've been leading this group of students through it. What's it mean to you to sort of really get into your faith on that level?
It's been amazing. I mean, I'm loving the interactions with the young people we're walking through the course with, I think, and their insights and questions and real love for the faith is super inspiring. So I'm loving that part of it. But also just diving into, so what we're doing with the course is pretty much kind of diving into the catechism. And something I'm really enjoying is that I think no matter how much you study, there's so much more to learn. And it's just like the depths of the faith are just profound, and we just can't, to some degree, we get to one level, but then there's always another level. And I think we're always exploring it. So I'm loving, it's a really good course we're doing. And so it's been wonderful, Father. It's been good.
You now call Melbourne home, but you work for the Auxiliary Bishop of Sydney, Bishop Umbers, who hasn't been on our podcast yet. So shout out to him. But we'll get to the bishop in a minute. I suppose how did you end up working for a bishop? Like, what have you done in your background to bring you to this point? Yeah,
sure. So a number of different study paths, I guess. So I studied at Campion College, so I got a liberal arts degree with a major in theology, so always had a really great love for theology. And then I studied at the John Paul II Institute when that was open, and did some studies in theological sciences, so in marriage and family specifically. And I think the path to kind of working for the bishop, I did a lot of research and writing for the Life, Marriage and Family Centre in the Archdiocese of Sydney after I finished my course of study at the John Paul II Institute. And basically that kind of, I think, just led me to really, a great love for the church, also specific focus on life issues. And Bishop Umbers is the bishop delegate for life. So a lot of the bishops in the bishops' conference have different focus areas. And so for Bishop Umbers, he's the bishop for life. So whenever there's any kind of like a life issue in the public sphere, he addresses those. And that was one of my strengths to some degree with the work I'd been doing. So this opportunity came up, and I'm loving it. It's a fascinating role, seeing the intricacies of the life of a bishop from a different perspective.
So, Silvana, you work for Bishop Umbers.
Yes.
AKA the meme lord, bishop meme lord. Is that correct?
The meme bishop, maybe.
The meme bishop. That's probably. I mean, the man has many titles. Okay, real question. Yeah. Do you make the memes, Silvana?
No, I don't. I think if I had $1 every time someone asked me that question, I'd be rich.
I've heard reports. That like a meme has been sent out, and the bishop is saying mass, and it's like, that's not possible. How did you do it? So I don't know. I've been trying to track down who it is, but if you're saying it's still him, I'll have to take it.
Silvana.
All right. Well, if that's the case,
it's the bishop himself all the way. Yep.
Jerry's listening live tonight, and she asks, and I don't want to get you in trouble with your boss, but what's your favourite meme of the bishops?
Oh, God. Well, that's a hard question. I find a lot of the time so I don't understand a lot of his memes, just so everyone knows. I don't. So if you guys don't either, then that's fine.
I probably understand 1 in 100. Like, one came up the other day on my Twitter feed, and I went, huh, like I get it. I didn't find it funny, but I got it. And that 99 more will come past before I even understand it.
They can be very, very abstract. Yes, so that's a good question, and I don't know if I can actually pinpoint a specific one from my memory right now. Sorry, Jerry, but I might have to do some research for you and let you know Tuesday night.
I'm a great fan of The West Wing, and I suppose the only thing I know about, researchers or writers, that's where I get it from. I get it from the fact that watching The West Wing, I realise that the president doesn't write every one of his own speeches. Is it a bit the same working for a bishop? Like, I write all my own homilies and I do all my own research. Obviously not important enough to have a research assistant. What does your role for the bishop include?
Yeah, so it does include a little bit of it. I don't write his speeches, if that's... so I don't write his speeches. I do a lot of the background research for him, so if it's on a specific topic, and I'll put a few things together for him. But the bishop is one that likes to speak off the cuff in many ways, which I think is great. He's got a lot of knowledge. He's very learned. And so in many ways you can kind of give him like a topic or a dot point of some regard, and he can take it and run with it and feed it into like scripture, some point in history, a abstract philosopher that some of us might know or that none of us really know. So he's great with that. So a lot of what I do is help with that side of things, and even some of his like articles that we release are some of my work as well, but it's all signed off from the bishop. So it's all doing work for the bishop. I just assist him because in many ways his timing as bishop, there's not a lot of opportunity to really sit down and kind of do a lot of research or writing themselves. So I just assist with that to really help, and help him be the best bishop he can be to some degree. Yeah.
Can I ask a really sort of maybe slightly controversial question then? Because there's always a lot of a conversation about the role of women in the church, and in particular women in leadership in the church and in positions of influence. It sounds like, well, you're a woman, obviously, you're a well-educated woman. It sounds like you've got a fair bit of influence in the life of the church. I suppose, how do you see the role of women and women in leadership in the church?
Oh, wow. I think in many ways, women can bring something wonderful, and they do bring something wonderful that's specific to what it means to be a woman to the church. And I think in many ways, it has its place. And I, as a woman, I support the bishop in the best way that I can, and really feel honoured that I have such a role to be able to do that. But I think in many ways, to some degree, I think leadership in the church can be misunderstood in that if it doesn't seem to be something that's kind of equal footing on like equal number of men, equal number of women, then it becomes a problem. And I think it shouldn't come down to numbers or anything. I think it needs to come down to how best we can serve God and bring glory to him through what he is calling each of us individually to do in our roles. So that's how I see it. I don't know if that answered the question properly,
great.
Father. But,
Brendan gave his top 5 tips last week for podcasters, which is a little ironic coming from us, considering we've probably had the most inconsistent and trouble-ridden podcast in the history of the church. But you and the bishop are part of a podcast as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I co-host a podcast. So the bishop's the main host. It's called the Episcopal Podcast. And I co-host that with, along with Dr. Matthew Tan. And what it's looking at is basically bringing to bear intellectual formation and how it kind of applies to our living everyday life in contemporary world. And so what we can kind of, where that fits in, really. And a lot of what we're doing is try to lay a few foundations. So we've been looking at like theology. Why is theology important? Why is philosophy important? Why is literature important? Why is history important? And then we're going into more specific things like ethics, or we even looked at, I think this week's edition was on like, why read Shakespeare? Like, does he have anything to bear on living the Catholic faith? And what that might look like. So a lot of it's to do with, the Catholic intellectual tradition and how it can really come to bear on our experience.
Fantastic. Brendan's top 5 tonight, you probably were listening, was saints to call on in a time of need. Have you got a top saint that you call upon?
Yes, I do. I've got a couple of saints, actually. I think John Paul II would definitely have to be up there. He's one of my main ones, but Saint Joseph has also become a real friend of mine recently. Yeah. When you were mentioning earlier, Father, about Saint Michael's, I started this devotion, Consecration to Saint Joseph, earlier this year, and when I was moving down to Melbourne and I was looking for a place to live, I was praying to Saint Joseph. And when I was looking at the place I'm at now, down the road is St. Joseph's, a church called St. Joseph's. And I ended up getting it anyway. I just thought it was quite providential how that all worked out. So I thought I'd just throw that in there based on what you were saying earlier about St. Michael's.
Oh, just on that, there's a few consecrations to St. Joseph out there. Which one did you choose?
I did the 33-day one by, it's a recent one, Father Don Calloway.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it.
It's good, yeah.
So John Paul II then, we obviously had his feast day in the past week, and you studied at the John Paul II Institute. Why is he so important to you?
I think first and foremost, having grown up with him as Pope, and I think the great love that my mum especially had for him, and really kind of watching him from afar, but at an age where I think I was really being formed in the faith, and really asking a lot of questions when it came to like my spiritual journey. So he played a massive role in that when I actually come to think of that. But then also I think I really connected with, I think his writings, especially Theology of the Body, was probably one of the first segues into his works that I had been exposed to. And that was pretty profound. But then I think having studied at the John Paul II Institute, going a little bit deeper. So I think when we're first exposed to something like Theology of the Body, for example, it might be applied in the context of like a youth group, or and a lot of it's about sexuality and God's plan for human sexuality, really. And I think when I studied at the John Paul II Institute, we went deeper. Like if you look at the tome of Theology of the Body, all of the talks that John Paul II gave over the course of, I think it was like 5 years or
4
something,
years,
I think.
yeah.
And so at every general audience on a Wednesday, and they compiled them all into what we now know as the Theology of the Body. And diving into that further at the John Paul II Institute was just amazing. Like his philosophy of the human person, so his study of the human person, and in light of scripture and all the philosophers that kind of formed him, I think I just found it really appealed, really spoke to my heart, brought a lot of joy, and I was really drawn to it in many ways.
Brendan, you sent me a message during the week saying, making me feel very old. Jerry likes to call me old. Thanks for listening tonight, Jerry. But you actually made me feel old, Brendan, because you said that I introduced you to John Paul II, which makes you very young and makes me very old. Are you serious?
Talk. It's a classic talk. It goes like this. Hello, everyone. My name is Father Nicholas Pearce. I'm the youngest priest in Melbourne. Click. Next slide is, do you know this man? Who of you knows this man? And it's photos of of that man, and he's camping, and then he's tying a shoelace, and he's going canoeing, and all of these things. And we're all sitting there like, nah, not sure. And then it's this. Sorry, this is the script. I've heard this talk 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 times.
I have the same introduction. Whatever the topic is, it starts the same for every talk.
and then it's. It disappoints me that no one knows who this man is, and it shocks me anyway. Something like that. It
upsets me. It's more than shocking. It absolutely that and Silvana, you'd be with me. Those classic black and white photos of Waidiwa cycling and canoeing and bushwalking with young people. Yeah. But you show them in schools now, and people don't. Trident Animation says we should have me carbon dated. Thanks, Trident. I thought we had something going on here, mate. I thought it was you and me against Brendan, but it seems to have turned this week. Daniel Belcher says he's still waiting for me to get my World Youth Day 2016 JPII tattoo. Yes, thanks very much, everyone. It's really turning tonight. But yeah, it really upsets me that people don't just automatically know who that is, because for a number of generations, but definitely for my generation, he was such a pivotal player in the life of the church. So Silvana, I think you were at World Youth Day 2016 as well. Is that when you went to Poland, or did you go another time?
No, so I went to Poland another time. It was a completely separate trip. I actually really wanted to go to Krakow for World Youth Day, but wasn't able to. So yeah, it was prior to that. My mum actually surprised me for a 6-day trip to Poland when we were doing a Europe trip, and I'd always wanted to go and just really see the culture and the place and the people that formed John Paul II. Like, I think for me, I just really wanted to experience it. I wanted to live it. I wanted to kind of breathe it for a few days. And being there and seeing how much they revered him, how much he was honored and respected, and really understanding a lot of what Poland had been through and has been through, especially in the 20th century, really, and to really understand the unique part that played in his life. Because he was a man that was incredible. Like, he suffered through so much. He lost his entire immediate family. He lost his mum when he was very, very young, and he lost his brother at a younger age as well. And then his father died when he was a bit older, before he went into the seminary. And he endured through that. He endured through the Nazi and socialist takeover of Poland during the Second World War and the Cold War, and just experienced so much horror and what it was like to be a priest during that time, and really be with the people. And I think, like, I think he's such a witness to hope, like that book that George Weigel wrote, Witness to Hope, about John Paul II's life. I think just that I haven't read the book, but the title, I think, just really speaks volumes in so many ways, because he had so much hope, persevered through so much, even the suffering he went through late in his life. Yeah, an incredible man to have such an insight into the human condition, but still really love. Like, he just loved so much, and that was his answer to the atrocities in the world.
I think
Into everything.
a man united with the cross, like, just every point of his life there was suffering and hardship, and as you said, like in those last few years, most people who can't identify those photos of him as a young priest can identify the photo of him as a stooped over, Parkinson's ridden old pope. I still remember where I was that final week of his life. I remember quite vividly the night before he died here in the church in Melbourne. The cathedral was locked. It was just before our cathedral had those big sort of steel gates put around the outside, so you could get right up to the front doors at any time of the day or the night, but it was locked and in darkness. And so much did the young people of Melbourne want to pray that we gathered in Bourke Street at the city square, which is now a train station, and there was this candlelit rosary procession up Bourke Street, and we sat outside the locked, dark St. Patrick's Cathedral with candles, praying the rosary. There would have been at least a couple of hundred young people, and this was before social media, before Facebook. It was before sort of things like this sort of happened easily, but somehow the word got out, and the young people of Melbourne gathered, and it just was a real outpouring of love for this guy who had obviously loved us as the young people of the church. There was a real sense of that sort of that total giving of self, and that outpouring of love that he also then expected of us in our own lives. So, yeah, a great example. So, Brendan, if I've done anything in my priesthood, introducing you to that man is one thing. So I'm quite glad of that. Silvana, of all the things in the church that you've sort of done a bit more of study in, you've also gone into canon law. Like, tell us a little bit about that, because I suppose it's not the most popular of disciplines within the church. It's pretty dry at times. Why canon law?
Yeah, so you're right there, Father. It can be dry, and it's not very popular. When I tell people I have an interest in canon law, they kind of look at me really weirdly and something like, "What is wrong with you?" So I get that a lot. But I think, canon law for me, I just had an interesting encounter with it when I was younger. I didn't realize that we actually had canon law in the church. Like, I didn't realize there was actually laws in the church, which is kind of a bit odd. Might seem a bit odd to hear. But I remember my mum introducing me to it, and I think I've always had a really keen interest in law, but I kind of wanted to attach it to theology, and I didn't really know how. And then when I realized that canon law existed, I was like, okay, maybe that's a really good combination to kind of work from. And I find it fascinating. Like, it's just, I think I came to canon law. So I guess for those who may not know what canon law is, it's a list of laws, really, that kind of govern the side of the church that looks at things that are valid and things that would be invalid. So for looking at marriages, for example, or even ordinations, so what makes the conferral of sacraments valid or invalid, but even other things like the rights and obligations of the Christian faithful. So really what we're obliged, what our rights are as baptized persons, and so forth. So for me, like, I came to it to study it really after I had studied theology and philosophy, and I found that what it really did was kind of really present a real rounded picture of the faith. The one profound thing I found when I studied canon law was really it exists for the salvation of souls. That's exactly what it is. So rather than looking at it as this arbitrary list of laws or things that we have to follow, or that might become a bit abstract, the reason why it exists is for the salvation of souls. It's there for a reason. It's to help put parameters and boundaries that really safeguard us and on our journey to heaven, really, in so many ways. And once I realized that that was the case, I'd done a little bit of work in marriage tribunals. I was like, okay, like this is the point: is if being concerned with the salvation of souls is primarily what we're meant to be doing with our faith, then that's a huge calling and a remarkable way in which we can really serve God and bring glory to Him. So I dived into it because I found it super fascinating, which might seem a bit odd, but yeah, I love it. It's just a really fascinating part of the church.
One of the, I suppose, popular views of canon law out there in society is often that the church has these secret laws that sort of we follow, and we follow at the expense of, I suppose, the civil law or the law of the land. Is that true? Can you explain that a little bit?
Really, I think in many ways, with civil law and canon law, they feed into one another in so many ways. I think there might be some circumstances that, well, really, when it comes to canon law, it can't technically really go against civil law. So if you're looking at a marriage case, for example, we can't declare that a marriage is null without there being like a civil divorce case that's gone through, for example. So they do have to work hand in hand, and I think that that's really, really important. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Father.
Well, yeah, I suppose one of the things that I always remember from canon law, and one of the beauties about canon law and having smart canon lawyers around you, is that one of the most common things that we say is, do you know what, I'm going to get some advice on that because I'm not quite sure. But I suppose one of the things I remember quite fundamentally is the basic principle of canon law is that unless the law of the land goes against the sort of the moral teachings of the church or the moral obligations of the church, then we're obliged to follow the law of the land.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is where I think the false sort of dichotomy is often put out there, that the church sort of is trying to create its own laws to get around the laws of the state, where canon law specifically tells us that as Christians, as people of faith, whether we're religious or laity, we're called to be good citizens first and foremost and follow the laws of the land, in so much as they don't encroach on conscience or matters of the moral life or contradict that, and that's where we then have to sort of start exercising our conscience. But especially when it comes to issues of things like abuse and the protection of the vulnerable and things like that, the church's first and foremost response is, well, let's use the law of the land first. Like there's no sort of secret canon law to sort of try and protect or cover or hide things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree, Father. Yeah.
Brendan, you were moving towards the camera in expectant sort of fashion, but now you're frozen completely. It's just you and I, Silvana. He's gone. Poor Brendan. His internet was really playing up this evening. Silvana, we're almost out of time anyway, wait a minute. There you are, Brendan. Just when I was about to cut you off completely. Go for it.
I just wanted to ask one question because I feel like it's relevant, and I was waiting. My internet, I was like, "Oh, am I going to ask it?" It's just about. I'm sure you might have seen it coming across social media. It's been hitting mine quite a lot, and even kind of on some of the, normal media. What is it? Secular media. That's the word. It's to do with the comments that Pope Francis made in an interview, like a 2019 interview that have been recently released about. Civil convenciera, civil union, I think is what is kind of hitting the headlines. And I was hoping, I don't know, have you seen it? What are your thoughts on it?
Sorry, was that to me or to Father?
Silvana, sorry.
Yeah, no, all good, Brendan. I had. I haven't followed it like completely closely, But I think one of the things that I find with the media in general, and with regards to even just things that Pope Francis says, I think it's really important to go to like actually what he says. And really understanding what context he's speaking as well. So I find that's like super, super important. I think from what I had heard, I think that when it comes to the terminology that he was using, I think like because he's speaking in Spanish, so we're trying to translate. I think a lot of the time what has happened or what's happened in this scenario is there might be a misinterpretation of what he actually meant in the Spanish. So I think so that's kind of been interesting, but even just distinguishing between what's official church teaching and what is opinion or thought, or even like an interview with a press agent, really like distinguishing that. I think the secular media especially gets really confused with like how you declare official church teaching, which isn't via an interview, for example. I don't know, Father, what else do you have?
Yeah, I've got an even more basic principle than that, and that's the I'm going to start calling it the Saint Bernadette Subaru sort of principle. And we were talking this week, Silvana, on Tuesday night about Marian dogmas and the fact that 3 years after the dogma of the Immaculate Conception was pronounced, like officially promulgated by the Pope, Our Lady appeared to this small peasant girl in rural France. And she proclaimed, "I am the Immaculate Conception," and this girl had no idea that this dogma had been proclaimed in Latin all these years earlier, and it was the only way that the bishop of that town actually trusted that it was a true apparition, and that was because there was no way possible that this girl would know that the Holy Father in Rome had made this proclamation. And I've just got a little bit, to a certain degree, jaded, I suppose, sick and tired of both, I suppose, the mainstream media, but even Catholic media sometimes, just printing and dissecting and commenting on absolutely every word that every pope or that the Pope has said. And I've actually just started switching off on it. And those of you who were listening last week know that I watched the Social Dilemma on Netflix. So I've deleted Facebook from my phone. And it's actually just been really good for my spiritual life, because I don't see some of this stuff. And so I'm still on Twitter, which I mainly use for news, and something flicked up this week, and I was like, what is this all about? And then I'm like, I know what the church's teaching on this matter is. Do you know what I mean? In my own faith, and again, I think it goes back to that gospel we had today. My heart is secure in the Lord. I've given my life to Him. And I've read, I understand the church's teaching. And until such time there is a dramatic proclamation of a change of teaching, and until such time Our Lady comes down and affirms it to me in my life sort of 3 years later, in my small peasant village, I'm not actually going to let some of these sort of things upset me, because I'm not actually quite sure who's pushing this. Where's it coming from? Is it from the secular media? Is it from a particular section or fact or sect or within the church? I'm not letting these things sort of just sway me anymore, because they can really sort of, and I think it goes back to that first point of sort of Ignatian discernment is, what does this do to me when I read it? Is this upsetting and making me angry and disquiet and disrupting my prayer? And I'm actually, do you know what? I've stopped praying, because I'm just cycling through social media to see who's commenting on who. I don't need that. I've got enough problems in my own life at the moment without that. So I don't know. I sort of saw it, dismissed it, and moved on, because I'm just like, do you know what? It's not a proclamation of faith. It's whoever, from wherever, someone is beating something up. So I've moved on. So that's how I treated it, the news this week, Brendan. So not particularly the most theological of approaches, but sometimes I think duck and cover and just be sure of the faith that has been passed on to us. We know it. If you know what I mean? And Silvana, I think this is something that we get from Canon Law as well, for lay faithful as well, if you know what I mean. You know the faith that has been given to you. It's your faith. And if you've done the reading, you've done the research, you've read, you've informed yourself and you're a person of prayer, then trust the faith that is yours, the deposit of faith that's been handed on to you. And you have a right to that. So, I don't know, that's my soapbox for the end of the podcast. We're done. Silvana, the last question that we ask everybody, what have you learned about yourself during lockdown that you're gonna now? You moved from the free People's Republic of New South Wales to the oppressive sort of regime of Victoria in lockdown. So what have you learned in lockdown that once we come out of the other side of this that you're going to try and hold on to?
What have I learnt? Wow. I think probably one of the main things that I've learned is really not to take the sacraments for granted.
Yep.
I think that's a main thing. I think having gone through 2 lockdowns, right, first time around, I think it was very much like I didn't realize it hit me really hard. I was like, because we couldn't go to mass, and I was just like, I didn't realize how much I actually took it for granted to be able to go to daily mass, and then having emerged again. And having been able to go and then going back into second lockdown, and I was like, no, I'm just like, I can't take this for granted anymore. And I think the prolonged nature of this second lockdown, so I think really coming to terms with that and, really looking forward to kind of coming out on the other side and having a renewed experience of the sacraments. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, God willing, Silvana, it'll be soon. But just a reminder, if you haven't already, make sure you head across to equalityforfaith.com.au and sign that petition so that our politicians know that you would like our churches to be treated equally in the roadmap to recovery. The Archbishop in the last week has really encouraged everybody to write to their local member as well, or to email or phone them in the week ahead and just express how important opening of churches is. So make sure you seek out who your local member is, both in the lower house and the upper house, and you make a phone call or send an email this week. Thanks, Silvana, for being with us tonight. We're very glad to have had you, and we look forward to doing some more work with you now that you're calling Victoria and Melbourne your home. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. God bless. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for another good night. Next week, a special guest. Not very often that we're so organised that we can announce next week's. But we are this week. Father Michael Kong, Papa Don Preach, does his
Preach.
He does his own YouTube stuff as well. So we're really glad to have him, chaplain at Melbourne sorry, that's me. He's the chaplain at Australian Catholic University here in Melbourne. So we're really glad to have him on and have a chat about the work that he's been doing here in Melbourne during lockdown. But otherwise, Brendan, it's been another good week. Reminder, if you haven't, to subscribe to the podcast on Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. Just search either Melbourne Praise or Sunday Night Live. And you can also find us on Facebook. We are winding up the Rosary and Chaplet at the end of this week. It's sort of happening in anticipation that churches will reopen soon enough. But we will continue with Sunday Night Live until such time as we have worked our way through every conceivable topic and all of Brendan's top 5s. So we'll be back next Sunday. Thanks, Brendan.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Father. God bless. Have a good night.
Cheers. God bless everyone.